So you can see the FERC standard, the high one, at 1,600. But as you go down that chart, they go lower and lower. The American Petroleum Institute, 1,500 BTUs, but that's if you have safety equipment on. Department of Urban Development, 450. Society of Fire Protection Engineers, 800 BTUs. Opinions of Safety Engineers, 450 to 500 BTUs. FERC uses a high standard, and what we're asking FERC to do is to use, at a minimum, use the Society of Fire Protection Engineers at 800 BTUs, because if they use that standard, Weaver's Cove would not be allowed to build their facility. The last, thank you, gentlemen. The last thing I want to mention, emergency evacuation. John had talked about that. The land-based Weaver's Cove facility was approved by FERC in 2005. Condition 67 in the final environmental impact statement requires the development of an emergency response plan, including the evacuation plan prior to the commencement of service. There are 3 significant problems with that. First, the FEIS only requires a plan. It does not say it has to be a viable plan or an emergency evacuation plan that actually works. So Weaver's Cove is not required to create a viable emergency action plan. They only have to develop escape routes. Secondly, the emergency response plan is to be developed during the construction phase of the project. This is backwards. FERC should require a viable emergency response plan prior to the construction of the LNG facility. Lastly, given that both John and I believe that the vapor dispersion zone and the thermal radiation zone are artificial zones, zones that are too small, the lack of a viable emergency response plan for this project is particularly disturbing when considering trying to evacuate nearly 9,000 people in such a short period of time. Let me read you a short passage regarding the feasibility of a viable emergency plan by the Massachusetts Executive Office of Public Safety and Security when they wrote to FERC in February of 2009, stating that after consulting with fire chiefs in the area, it is feared that any evacuation would result in mass chaos and create traffic jams that would bring most vehicles to a standstill. Not only would this interfere with evacuation, it would severely impact any kind of emergency response to the area of the proposed facility. They also stated in the same report, it may not be possible to overcome all the safety and security implications regardless of the resources. In closing, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see by the examples provided, the FERC approval process is clearly flawed. John and I have only touched on 3 of the most important reasons why FERC should reconsider the approval of Weaver's Cove project, and we are asking the Rhode Island LNG Task Force, and hopefully the entire Rhode Island legislation, to request FERC to reopen and reconsider the 2005 siting. The Rhode Island LNG Task Force has before it an extraordinary opportunity to protect the people of Rhode Island and to protect Rhode Island waterways. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. I do have, Senator Bates has a question for you.
Have you or your group given this information to FERC, or have you given this to any other group that's given it to FERC?
Yes, we have.
What's the reaction?
We've not rehearsed.
No reaction.
No reaction. Somebody talked about, supplying this information to our federal delegation. It has been supplied numerous times, and we have not heard a response from
Has the
anyone.
federal delegation given it to FERC?
Not that I'm aware of, sir.
They haven't responded to us. We've sent it to FERC. We have sent it to the GAO, the Center for Public Integrity, and the Project on Government Oversight, because we have asked those last 3 agencies that I mentioned to have an investigation of FERC's approval of use of scientifically disproven models for creating these zones.
But you've given it to your federal delegation?
And we have given it to the federal delegation as well.
You haven't heard from them?
That's correct. We have suggested legislation to them that suggesting that a law be passed that scientifically validated models have to be used to site these facilities.
I understand that, but you haven't heard back from your delegation?
Exactly. We have not heard back from them.
Thank you very much. The last 3 witnesses I have here listed would be Bob Hamill from the Bristol Yacht Club, Dick Lynn from Jamestown, and Michael Tomiladis from the Kickamilla River Council. Was there anybody else who wanted to speak? Okay. All right, why don't you come up, if you grab a chair and bring it up also? Kind of was fussing a little bit. And again, if you would be as succinct as possible. Yes, time. Thank you. Please identify yourself when you begin your testimony, if we would go from my left.
My name is Dick Lynn. I'm from Jamestown, Rhode Island, and I'm a concerned citizen in terms
Is your mic on, sir? Thank you. It's a button up.
There we
is
go.
on. There
Is
we
that
go.
better?
Yeah.
My name is Dick Lynn. I'm from Jamestown, Rhode Island, and I'm a concerned citizen who's been active in the cause in a number of ways. We've been addressed with a number of people on the other side, Hess's side, who want to debunk the myths, and I'd like to debunk the debunkers for a bit, because we've been provided with a lot of misinformation at the same time that we've been giving out misinformation. A good example is 60 years ago on Jamestown, where I live, there was a refinery that they wanted to put, and all the same people then, including some of the newspapers that are now touting LNG, were touting a refinery, saying it would bring more jobs, it would be non-polluting, it would be great for the economy. I think we all know better now. And I think that I'm finding the same things in a parallel universe here with Hess LNG. Sorry if I don't call it Weaver's Cove. It sounds a little bit too much like a picnic grove. It's Hess LNG, and it's a chemical facility.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go through a little more quickly and skip over. I know this is in writing with a number of you. But as a result of that battle, we got some great groups like Save the Bay, and they helped clean up the bay, and it's clean. And we hate to go back and find out that with dredging it won't be anymore. We brought the America's Cup here. It really strengthened the reputation of the region, and we're trying to bring it back again. I heard someone say it couldn't be held here. Well, the facts are, and these are the facts, according to the people in the yachting community, is there'll be different types of yachts. A lot of times they're held offshore and they're building a facility. So it wouldn't affect it, but bringing in the ships would. Bringing in the tankers would. In terms of jobs, Hess has promised a number of jobs in the area. I've heard anywhere from 500 to 1,000 temporary jobs and 35 to 40. Canaport, a facility that's 4 times, maybe 3 to 4 times as large as Hess LNG, has a certain number of jobs that are documented. It has 1,000 jobs that were temporary, half of which were given to local people, and the other half brought from out of the region for their expertise. 35 to run the facility. If you translate that, unless Hess plans on spending more than a company would reasonably, that would translate to 10 to 15 permanent jobs to run the facility and 150 to 200 temporary construction jobs. I'm not against LNG. I'm for responsible siting of LNG, which currently would be offshore and out of a populated area. In terms of security, and I'm going to go past the jobs, I feel like I've mentioned that. In terms of security, you've probably seen the report from Richard Clark to Patrick Lynch, and I think that's an important one to acknowledge. This is the same Richard Clark who said before 9/11 that Al-Qaeda was likely to strike here. And he was right. He also says that in the future, LNG will be a future target. He feels that this would be a likely target because of the travel through populous areas, the presence of the Naval War College and the Undersea Warfare Center, and it would be silly to disavow his expertise and to not take that seriously. I know that on Jamestown, I love our police. I think they're wonderful. But if anyone wanted to try to do anything, I don't think there would be any stopping them. So I think that one quote from Mr. Clark is important to read.